I think we are. We are positioned well. So, John, thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for being a patron of my new company, the London Singers Collective.
It's a pleasure. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
And from what I see of the schedule, it looks very adventurous and constructive, just what young singers need.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. It's I've had feedback, and when they tell me it's not what they need and I should try something else, then I listen to them and I alter the events to suit what they think they need. You know, what they think the gaps in their training are.
Yes, I was going to ask that about college training.
Okay.
I mean, I'm the president of the college in the Royal Northern,
right.
Myself, but I don't know every detail of what goes on there, although it's always a joy to go there. It's a good atmosphere. But are some of these things missing from the teaching of singers in music colleges? Some of the things that we're working on with your group?
Well, I think it's impossible for music colleges to cover absolutely everything because, I mean, I can really tailor each event to what I either think people need or what they tell me they need. I imagine when you've got 50 to 100 singers on a course, it's much harder to do that and there's much less space in the schedule. So I don't think it's a case that it's missing, it's just they might not get round to these things very often. And also some of these topics that I'm covering, I think if the music colleges put it on their syllabus, they wouldn't be ticking the right boxes in order to get some of the funding they need to run the courses in the first place. So I can't really answer that question. I think some of the stuff is missing, but I don't think that's because the colleges are at fault. I think in the whole, the colleges do a really good job. But I think with every educational institution, no matter how good, there will always be gaps. And I just thought it would be helpful, as I'm in a place to be able to do so, to try and fill some of those gaps.
I mean, the spectrum is so wide, isn't it, with a singer? I mean, there's so many aspects that one can deal with, and of course the music college can't deal with them all, as you've said.
Exactly. I think there are courses which exist now on these syllabuses which didn't when I was there, like teaching people how to deal with their taxes and stuff. And that's good. But like I say, I don't think they can cover everything. It's like, I think even Cambridge and Oxford University, when dealing with their academic subjects, they can't cover everything, and the individual singers have to take some of the responsibility for that. On the other hand, if the singers aren't told that they need to look at these things on their own, they don't know. You know, so I think it's quite good to have multiple sources of information, both inside and outside of the colleges. And I mean, and if you don't know these things when you get into the industry, you hopefully quickly find out. Because you find if you don't know these things, you're possibly less employable, maybe. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. A lot of the people who come to your events, are they still students at college?
I would say between 50 and 60%. The rest are working professionals. Some of them aren't actually singers. I've had a few composers and conductors, just because they work with singers a lot and they think it will be useful to know these things.
Yeah, because I was involved in the event just down the road some months ago, and I had the feeling that there were, as you said, perhaps 50% students and then 50% of everybody else.
Yeah, amazingly. So that was the first event in the arts that I put on. That was in March. Amazingly, 50% of that event were from Trinity College of Music, because Yolanda Thompson, who is involved with Trinity College of Music and Pegasus Opera, put the word out and gathered a whole load of pupils to come along, which made my very first event in the arts much more of a success than it would have been otherwise. So I have her to thank for that, largely. Can I ask a question?
Please.
So,
you're interviewing me. I'm sorry, I've been interviewing you.
It's nice to be asked a question. Something I've always wondered about your voice, it's obviously unusually strong and has its own particular unique quality to it. Is this something that came over time as you trained it, or did you find your voice broke and all of a sudden you had this gigantic instrument there?
Well, a mixture of the two, really. I think I was always quite a noisy kid, actually. I was the youngest of 5.
Okay.
Brought up in a sort of in a place called Oswald Twistle in an old textile town in Lancashire. So very strongly Methodist family. I was very practical. My dad was an engineer. My older brother became an engineer. So very hands-on, but keen amateur musicians, of course. So I was competing with all these other people singing. They were all singing in the house around the piano. It was before when I was we got a television perhaps when I was 15 or something like that. So it was, a lot was going on before that time. And but when my voice broke, I was gifted with a very strong, deep bass voice from the beginning, really. I mean, there was a phase when my voice was breaking. I'd been a boy soprano and sang a few concerts as a boy soprano, and then there was a phase probably when I was 13 or 14 where in the school choir I was singing as a tenor actually, with a chest voice, but my voice hadn't properly broken. Can't remember exactly how old I was, but when my voice broke, it was a very deep bass voice, and thank God for 4-part harmony, because of course with 4-part harmony you can sing with any hymn tune that's or whatever, you can sing an octave lower, you can harmonize quite freely. So that's where I think I always had a very robust, muscular sort of voice. I think I was gifted with that. As for the timbre of the voice, I think, from that point, it took me 10, 15 years to learn how to sing well enough to be a professional singer.
Really? Okay.
I would say.
Okay.
From the age to from 16 to 30. I was a professional singer from the age of, from 1970 when I was 23, 24 years old. But I think I was probably fully formed by the time I was 30. But that was, it's quite hard learning how to sing really well. And so I had a lot to learn. But I think it's very important to learn how to sing really well, and it's hard to talk about these things, isn't it? But the great thing that each singer has is the quality of his or her own voice, the natural timbre, which you're referring to, the natural timbre of my voice. And so one must learn to sing naturally, healthily, naturally, efficiently, with all the techniques involved in opera singing, the passaggio, going up to the high notes, which I found particularly difficult when I was young. Every vowel really ringing naturally, all the resonators ringing really well. And so it's a natural production. And if it is natural, then the quality of your own voice comes out. If you're copying somebody else, or you're manufacturing a sound, and you say, I want to sound like, Nikolai Gyaurov or something, as I used to think when I was young, that's very limited. No matter how fantastic he was, one's own voice is one's great gift. One's own natural timbre is the unique thing that every singer has. That's never, it's completely unique to each individual.
Do you think, with today's technology, the fact that you can go on your phone and access so many recordings of so many singers, there is more of a temptation to try and sound like people?
Probably, I would have thought so, because it's ubiquitous. You can be on the train and you can think, oh, I'll just listen to my favourite recording another 3 times while I'm commuting into college or something. And that's dangerous, because your favourite recording is going to become ingrained on your memory, and it's very difficult to shift. I know I've talked about this quite a lot. I always go on about it. You only need to listen to a recording, let's say 3 times, and it's quite difficult to get rid of that memory in your mind. So ideally, it's every time you listen to a recording of an aria you're working on, or a role, listen to somebody else, listen to something different each time. Never, I would almost say, never listen to the same recording twice. You might get away with it twice, but certainly not more than twice.
So I learnt that lesson, I think, when I was 18, in that I was asked to do the solos in a Messiah, And I thought, well, I can learn the music, but let's go and hear how a professional does it. And so I bought this recording and I turned it on, and I actually didn't go to Thus Saith the Lord, which is the first bass solo. I went to For Behold, and I don't know why I ended up with that track, but this guy started singing, and I thought, oh my word, how does anyone make such an impressive sound? And I looked at the back of it and John Tomlinson. Okay, so I did actually, my first few messiahs, I spent trying to sound like you, and very quickly learned that my voice is not the same as your voice, and where you do certain things, I just can't do.
We worked on Messiah, you and I, didn't we?
We did.
4 years ago or something?
Last year.
Was it last year?
Yes, last year, yes.
Oh, I'm thinking of another occasion.
Okay.
But yeah, yes. But I'm glad you learned that lesson. Actually, that recording I did with Trevor Pinnock, which was, I think, the late 80s or something, that particular number, For behold, the darkness shall cover thee, is, for some reason, even I say, it is particularly wonderful, that particular recording of that company recitative. I mean, there is something that we really hit the nail on the head with that. I mean, it's...
Did you have to do many takes, or did it just work out?
No, I think it was probably very, very quick. I mean, the whole recording is good, but, you know, I have friends like you who have, I think somebody last week said that, you know, For behold, darkness shall cover thee. I was just listening to that. It is absolutely amazing. I mean, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but that one, we really got it.
Well, I think the words "darkness shall cover the earth," if I can think of any voice in the past 50 years that suits those words, it's probably yours more than anyone else's. So I'm not surprised it worked out well. You mentioned that you struggled with the top of your voice.
Yeah, well, it took me a long time to learn the technique of the passaggio, which is a slowly, increasingly concentrated sound as you go up. In my case, the very extreme is an F sharp at the top, and that it is a technique, isn't it? It's a sensation you have to get used to. You can't feel your vocal cords directly, like you feel your nose. You have to work on sort of sensation and sort of instinct and feelings, and a good teacher saying to you, that is better than that. What you did then is an improvement. And you slowly, inch by inch, you learn how to do it. But I remember one lesson with Patrick McGuigan, my first teacher in Manchester, this is probably about 1966 or something, and I sang a very closed A vowel on a D, but you know, reasonably high note. E, and I thought, well, that can't possibly be any good. It's not a bass sound. It's a weedy little bit of a sound. You know, it's a narrow sound. That can't possibly be any good. And my teacher said, that's good. That's the way to go.
Right.
So that's why you need a teacher.
Yeah.
Because of my own instincts at that age, I would have gone for but I wouldn't have gone for I wouldn't have gone for the closed vowels.
Right.
So that was crucial, you see.
Okay. So did you have two teachers throughout your training, or were there more? Because I've read that you studied with Paddy, who I also had lessons with for a little bit.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Well, this would have been going back 10, 12 years ago. Yeah. I spent about 18 months studying with him, and I found him very useful.
He was very direct, very practical, very hands-on, and he worked. I mean, he was a workaholic. When I first went to college in 67, was it? I had 3 lessons a week.
Right. Okay.
Which was absolute luxury. I mean, now I think most students have 1 lesson a week.
And will you say there were other things that he was, other than just the high notes, he was particularly useful for? I mean, maybe that's a bit of an unfair question.
I think he was particularly useful for getting my voice going. He was very physical, actually. And I think I had been, from being a boy soprano and then having this sort of the bass voice, I think I was rather limited and I was hemmed in as a singer. I suspect my voice was very controlled and sort of, you know, introverted. and Paddy made it into an operatic instrument, an instrument that projected.
Were there particular ways in which he did that, or would it have been different for every pupil?
Probably different for every pupil. I mean, the sheer amount of singing was tremendously helpful. You know, just really singing those opera arias, just really the breath flowing, the work in the abdominal muscles and the diaphragm, you know, the flow of breath and the projection and the physicality of it was something I hadn't experienced before. So probably the first year of my training with him was very much a discovery of that. And then later on it was, as I said, the passaggio and the finding the closed vowels as the way into the high notes.
Right.
The closed vowels, E, A, U, O, are far easier to bring up to the top because of their closed nature,
right.
Rather than the ah, eh, which have to undergo quite a modification as they go up through the passaggio into the top. The closed vowels, E, basically doesn't change. It just basically doesn't change that much.
Okay. Was your next teacher, was it Ottokar Kraus?
Ottokar Kraus, yes.
Ottokar Kraus. Was he similar or very different?
Because
he's somebody, although I hear his name a lot as having taught a lot of very good singers,
yes.
I don't know anything about what his approach was.
I mean, this was in the 70s now. So I was at college 67 to 70, then I came down Glyndebourne chorus. I did do some work for a time with Rupert Bruce Lockhart. And I'm just trying to think, yes, that was actually the next teacher. Well, Freddie Cox, who was the principal at Manchester. When I first came to London, he gave me 1 or 2 lessons.
Okay.
And he was a very skilled teacher. And then I was in the Glyndebourne chorus and I went for a lesson with Rupert Bruce Lockhart, who taught me, was very good on breathing, for instance. I remember him saying, when you breathe in, feel the shoulders are dropping, so that all the work is done lower down. It's, you know, that's just one little thing. But I left Rupert eventually because I sensed that my voice was becoming too bassified. Everything was rather worried, dark, and he always wanted this warm chorus, which is a bit limited. So, I mean, he was great, and then a lot of my contemporaries were working with Ottokar Kraus, who had been at the Covent Garden soloist for many years, and who was a very skilled man. So I was working with him probably until about 1980 or something. And again, he was a bit like Paddy in the sense that you really worked, you really sang. It was very physical. Again, a huge emphasis on the strength of the abdominal muscles and the diaphragm. Having referred to that, one must say that those muscles are always flexible. They mustn't be sort of just rock solid. There's always a sort of a flexibility about those muscles. And he was a good pianist too, actually. So we would sing through, you know, König Marker's monologue from Tristan and all. We would go through the role of Hagen. So we would do a lot of work. And he cured the bassification. He wanted brightness. He wanted, if anything, a more of a baritonal quality. He didn't. I mean, I was never a baritone, but he wanted the high overtones and the clear overtones, the clear vowels, not warmed up artificially.
Okay, interesting.
So it was very, very direct singer. I remember it was quite a transformation at the time.
Would that have anything to do with why and how you went on to sing roles which are very high for a low bass? Like, I mean, you ended up singing Dutchman a number of times.
Yes.
Which
is a baritone part.
Yeah, I mean, I know baritones who have done it and said, "Ooh, that's hard work. It's so high."
Yeah.
Do you think you're training with somebody like Ottokar Kraus?
Ottokar Kraus.
Ottokar Kraus would have helped?
Yes, I think he certainly made me very comfortable with roles like Leporello, Figaro. You know, the Mozart needs a bass baritone, really. You know, you need quite a lot of core to the voice, but there's a brightness about those roles. They're not typical bass roles, of course. There's a youthful quality, and so I think that probably stood me in very good stead. But it has to be said that I always thought of myself as a bass, really, until Daniel Barenboim phoned up and said, we would like you to sing Wotan in our next ring in Bayreuth. You know, I would like you to. And that was a huge change, because I had to make the decision vocally, was my bass voice able to encompass the higher tessitura? Okay. Wotan, the highest note is an F sharp at the very top, but there's only 4 or 5 F sharps. It's not so. It's not a huge extension of range, but of course the role does lie. A lot of it lies above middle C. Right. So you need a lot of strength and stamina, and the voice needs to be able to sit well up there. And so at the time, everybody said, "Don't do it. You'll wreck yourself. Big mistake." A bass trying to be a bass baritone, a bass trying to sing Wotan.
Had there been any that you knew of?
There had been. I mean, a singer like Josef Greindl, you know, the Bayreuth singer, had done almost the same repertoire I had done. He had done Hagen and Fasholt and Fafner, the bass parts, and then he had moved up to the Wotans. So I wasn't the first. And of course, if you can do it, if you have the bass quality and you can manage the top, you've got it made, because you always have the godlike quality. You always have power.
Yeah.
So if you're a lighter baritone who finds the top easy, the voice will not be as impressive, probably. You know, because it's a higher placed voice.
Yeah.
So that came as a bit of a shock. Everybody warned me against making this transition, but I suppose I was sort of in my prime. I was, you know, I've been singing perhaps, I think, for 17, 18 years when this came in. I was probably late 30s, and so I could in fact do it, and it forced me to sing really, really well.
Okay.
You know, I couldn't have survived that role without singing really efficiently.
Yeah. And
with real bel canto. If I started blasting my way through it, I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So it had great benefits.
You had been doing quite a lot of Wagner before then anyway, right? Have you...
The bass parts?
Yes. Okay. Did you find singing lots of Wagner took you away from other repertoire? Have you ever found that singing the heavier music meant that you couldn't sing some of the other stuff you had been doing previously, or was that not an issue for you?
In order to sing, say, the Flying Dutchman, I had, which is really a baritone part, I had to sort of work very hard on the top. In other words, every day I would be singing the role probably through, and the muscles, the lower muscles of the abdomen became, my body expanded in that region almost visibly. You know, okay. It became more of a barrel here, and so that regularity of work is necessary in order to sing those roles. But I don't think it ever, I think I could always go back to Handel or Mozart. I remember that was no problem, actually.
Okay.
So that's the answer to your question. So it's hard, really hard work to get into those high bass baritone parts for me, but it didn't stop me singing other parts of the repertoire. I suppose that one slight exception to that is possibly the basso cantante sort of repertoire of Verdi, let's say, you know, Philip II or something like that. If you've just been doing a Siegfried Wanderer, which is very, very, it's Wotan at the end of his life, it's very, very heavy. Perhaps the next day it will be very hard to shift to that very warm basso cantante line that King Philip needs. That would take perhaps a few days.
Okay, I wasn't aware that you had sung King Philip.
I haven't sung many performances of King Philip, but Opera North I did, a new production, I remember, in about 1991 or something.
Okay, right.
With Paul Daniel conducting her.
Okay. That was going to be one of my questions. You obviously have sung the majority, if not all, of the kind of great bass roles. Do you have 3 or even 5 roles that you would have loved to have done but haven't yet for some strange reason? It's just never happened. Or have you literally sung all of them now?
Well, there's very few that I haven't sung. But for instance, Nick Shadow in The Rake's Progress, I never sang.
Okay.
To be honest, I'm not that regretful about that.
Okay, why is that?
Oh, that's a long discussion, isn't it? It's a discussion about Stravinsky's Rake's Progress and the way it is written.
Okay.
And the vocal line, that's quite a long discussion, but it is, to me, it is not a particularly rewarding role vocally.
Okay.
And not that rewarding dramatically. I mean, I shouldn't be saying these things. It's a good part, you know.
Well, I think the people who watch this will value your honesty in your opinions.
Yes.
Say what you like.
But yes, I would have liked to have sung that part, but I never did. And Bottom in A Midsummer Night's Dream, everybody says, well, you must have done that part because and I never did.
Okay.
So that would have been great fun. I mean, that's a wonderful role, and I love Britain's music. So there's 1 or 2 like that, but I sang at some time or other pretty well all the Verdi bass roles and all the Wagner bass roles and the bass baritone ones, all the Mozart, and so from Monteverdi and Handel all the way through to Harrison Birtwistle, I've done a heck of a lot, and so nothing stands out as you're suggesting it might. Saying, "Oh, if only I'd been given the opportunity."
Because
I've been given the opportunity to do so many more things than I ever dreamt I would. Yeah,
that's a nice way to look at it.
Yeah.
Because when you said King Philip, I was like, that's a question I was going to ask, and now I can't, because I can imagine a voice like yours. That's an obvious role for people to ask you to do.
Yeah, it's a wonderful part.
Yeah, I listened a while ago to your Desert Island Discs interview, and it comes across on there, and it's come across in other conversations and in the coaching sessions that you've been kind enough to give me. It seems like you just love singing, and you love giving a performance, giving something to the audience. If you could put into words what singing means to you, how would you say that?
Well, I mean, I'm 77 years old now, and I still sing every day, which I never thought I would. When I was younger, I thought I would retire at 60 or something. But why do I keep singing? Because it's sort of part of me. It's a physical activity. It's a thing which I do. I mean, it's part of my identity, I suppose. So that's why, and it's also physically very healthy, apart from anything else. And if I'm working on new repertoire, or reviving old repertoire, I don't do so many performances now. I sing sort of once a month rather than once a day, sort of thing, in performance. But it's mentally good. It keeps me mentally alive. I think it's very. So I think that's what keeps me going now. It's actually the physicality of singing. It's singing as a part of my life, as it has been for so long. And it's something that I love. I just love doing. I mean, language, for instance. The use of language and the thinking of a particular phrase and the various ways of doing it, the imagination, what's the character, what is happening to the character at this moment. So when you're working on a role at home, there's all this, it's a very life-enhancing experience, really. But before, you were mentioning about giving to the audience, and I think it's very important to have a distinction between preparation, which I've just been talking about, the fascination of preparation, the physicality of it, the singing, and the discipline of it, the language, and so on, and the imagination working. There's all that preparation. There's a difference between that and performance. But when the curtain goes up and you go on stage, you are then giving to the event. You're giving to it's not just giving to the public, you are giving to the piece, to the performance, to the public. You're giving to the experience of that, the next 3 hours or 3 or 4 hours. You are involved, you're in it, you're all together in this place, and it is something special. And so there's an act of giving yourself to it. Mm-hmm. There's in performance. So you're not showing off. It's not a disciplinary thing. You're not preoccupied. You should be wholeheartedly involved in every note and every word and every relationship with everybody else on the stage and with the audience. So there is a giving, a service. It's an act of service in a way.
Okay. That's really nice to hear, because doing any job where you become sort of the centre of attention can make you think about yourself an awful lot. It can make you quite egotistical, but it's really nice to hear that there's another way to approach it. I think, and that's not me saying that all singers become self-centered, but I think it is a danger. You, by necessity, end up just concentrating on yourself.
That's true, yes.
Yeah, so that's a really lovely way to make sure you are concentrating on the job.
Yes, of course it is all me. If I'm walking in the shoes of Hans Sachs or something, I'm going on stage with I know you're doing a session on Stanislavski coming up next year, so with basically a Stanislavskian approach. Who am I? Where am I going? What do I have an intention going on the stage, or do I just happen to be appearing? Or and every living every moment in Hans Sachs's shoes. Very appropriate sort of article of clothing to
yes.
Connect with Hans Sachs. Where was I now? So of course it's me. It's my imagination. It's my voice. It's my thoughts, which are I don't like the word interpret really, which are sort of inhabiting this role as genuinely as I can, and as being true to the piece, being true to the music. So that's the sort of ethic behind it. But of course, ultimately, it's me. I don't, it's my thought, my imagination, my voice, my body, that's involved. So of course, you're right. There's a danger of becoming egocentric.
Yeah. Do you think there are things that are absolutely essential to a singer's training, which in the thick of it, in the job, are easily forgotten and are worth reminding people of?
That's a really difficult question. It's quite hard. I've been in the business such a long time, and it's all very natural to me. I don't rehearse as much now, I don't work as much now as I used to, but when I go into a rehearsal room with colleagues and a conductor and a pianist, it all feels so natural. And it's just like coming home in a way.
Okay.
And one's whole time, all of those hours on the stage, in orchestral rehearsals or in performance, it is a sort of enhanced stratum of your life in parallel with your normal life.
Right.
Your normal life is here. I mean, I speak for myself. And one has the privilege for, a tenth of your life or whatever it is, to be on this higher plane, where you have, you're given this incredible honor of being a part of great works of genius. And so of course you are on a high to some extent. You're on a high in those, in performance. I mean, your mind is working fast and you're physically alert. I don't think I've had any trouble in separating that from my normal life, who I am. For some reason, I think I'm capable of being Wotan on the stage with all his power and all his faults and and the hugeness of that role, and being basically an ordinary guy off stage.
Okay.
I mean, I think
I would agree with you.
I'm very ordinary.
if we've ever spent time together, I wouldn't say you act like Wotan, wander about in a self-important way. But then most singers I know who have done very well seem to be also very down-to-earth people as well. And I think that's maybe a key ingredient of finding success in a business like this. I think the more you are in the limelight, then when the lights are off and you're off stage, the more grounding and realism you have to bring you back to normal life and recenter yourself in ordinary everyday activities, family life. I think that's a very good balance to have. I remember once seeing an interview with Robert Merrill, and he said a singer, as well as practicing being an artist, first and foremost has to practice being a human being. Because when the career ends, whatever age you are, that's all you've got left. And I think that chimes with what you've just said as well. I have one more question in my head at the moment. So we talked about who your formative singing teachers are and what they taught you. Were there any other people in the business, colleagues, conductors, anybody else you worked with who were particularly influential and you hark back to what they teach you? Maybe that's also an unfair question because you've worked with a lot of people.
Yes, and there's so many. I mean, somebody mentioned yesterday the name of John Matheson, who was a conductor. He was on the staff of Covent Garden in the 60s and 70s. He ended up in Australia, I think. His son is now a stage manager at the Sydney Opera House, actually. And John, for a period of time, probably the late 70s, this is just one, I just picked that one name, who was so influential on me as a coach with, particularly with language, Italian, German, Russian. Dmitry Makarov, my Russian coach, we spent hours working on the language. Just such a wonderful man, such wonderful work. And so there's a whole sort of row, catalogue of people who I've found inspiring, and a whole catalogue of directors. I hesitate to mention names because I mentioned one and I missed mentioning another one.
Okay.
And I mean, later conductors with Daniel Barenboim, who I met, he phoned me up, as I say, in 1986 or something, and said, we would like you to sing Wotan. And then I went on to sing with him, I think, 18 roles in concert and in the Opera House over the next 20 years. So obviously somebody like that was huge inspiration. I mean, just an incredibly brilliant man with fresh ideas. And we were the Ring. It was new to him in 1988 when we first did it, just as it was new to a couple like Siegfried Jerusalem. It was new to myself. It was new, and there were a number of people doing that piece for the first time. So that was the most creative period in my career, I think, those years.
Okay.
In the Harry Kupfer another director, Harry Kupfer, just an inspirational director with whom, I did several roles, but many excellent English directors, Graham Vick, Keith Warner, Richard Jones.
So you've mentioned languages a few times. What's the hardest language you think you've ever had to sing in terms of anything, either the memorization of it, it being so different from anything you've done before, the formation of the vowels? Is there one that springs to mind?
For the first time recently, I've been working on the Czech language for Katia Kabanova, and that's quite tricky actually. But the answer to your question is that they're all wonderful actually. It's a rather blanket statement. But the glory of any language is getting into it and exploring the sort of spectrum of sound in each language, and so Russian, of course, you have to learn the symbols, the alphabet. That's an extra layer that you have to deal with. Although you can use a transliteration, but really, in order to sing good Russian, you need to read the Cyrillic script. You need to read it. If you read Russian, it's very logical and it's very clear, and that's crucial. So I would recommend to any singer singing anything in Russian, just spend, a month really working on the Cyrillic script.
Okay.
But possibly with a coach, hopefully with a coach. It's 5 soft vowels, 5 hard vowels, the alphabet, certain, the O when it's stressed is O, when it's unstressed it becomes more like an A. Certain, Gorbachev, not Gorbachev, Gorbachev. And so, this has to be learned, but if you learn the Cyrillic, then you're on a very strong foundation. Okay. Yeah.
Great. What have you got coming up beginning of next year?
Well, as I said, I'm working far less. This weekend I'm going to Inverness to sing Siegfried Act 3.
You keep saying I don't do very much, but every time I see you, I'm off here, I'm doing this.
No, I do. In a couple of weeks I'm going to Manchester for the congregation to present the awards as president. Okay. So I'm invited to judge competitions and things, and make speeches and things. So I do also, and master classes too. So I do all sorts. And so I don't have that many performances. I've got 2 major operatic contracts coming up. One is Katia Kabanova at Glyndebourne, but that's 2025. Okay. If I'm still around, which I'm sure I will be. And Festen, Mark Anthony Turnage at the Opera House. Okay. In about a year's time.
Okay. Is that a new work?
It's a new work, yes. Okay. It's a new work.
Is that a role that has been written for you?
I don't think that one has specifically been written for me. Mark Anthony Turnage is very keen for me to do that role, but to tell the truth, I don't think he had originally wrote it for me personally.
That's another question I wanted to ask you. House and Birtwistle wrote the Minotaur specifically for you.
Yes.
So yeah. Did you guys meet up and have conversations about the musical lines or anything else to do with it?
Well, before that, he wrote for me Gawain and the Green Knight. So he wrote the Green Knight for me, and we did have quite serious conversation and exchange of views on that. Okay. And I suppose I was sort of, when was that? About 1990. So I'd be about 40 years, 40 odd years old, and I remember speaking my mind about the text. David Harsent did a most wonderful libretto, but I was very forthright with him and with Harry about the directness that I wanted in the text. Okay. I just felt very strongly for the Green Knight, who sort of knocks on the door and comes in to King Arthur's court with all its, sort of effete sort of flattery and sort of, superficiality to some extent, and artificiality. And I wanted the Green Knight to be absolutely forceful and direct, as to break that apart.
Okay.
And so there was quite a lot of interaction between the three of us on that. The Minotaur, I don't remember much interaction, probably because we knew each other so well by that time that when the scenes came through the door and I looked at them, I thought they were just wonderful.
Okay. Is the Green Knight the character that has his head cut off?
Yes.
And then picks it up?
Yeah.
And carries on going?
Yes.
How did that work on stage?
Oh, it was brilliantly done. And so it was, with Harry Birtwistle, one of his sort of techniques on stage is to rerun things. In some cases, things are rerun 3 or 4 times. So it's like a clockwork machine, it just keeps going round and round and round.
Okay.
And so we played the scene of the Green Knight entering and eventually having his head chopped off. And then the stage went black. And then that scene was rerun quickly, like a silent, like sort of, sort of Buster Keaton sort of quick,
right.
Quick fire through, like a scene which had taken half an hour would just sort of take 3 minutes.
Right.
And so it was for this 3-minute repetition of this scene. It was not me playing the Green Knight. It was a substitute with a detachable head. I shouldn't give these some. And so this person had his head really chopped off, and then the body picked up the head, and it was an incredibly sophisticated mechanical head. The mouth moved and the eyes moved, and I think Spitting Image had done it actually, and the same people. And I was singing in the wings for this head. So that's how it was.
Do you think you're the only opera singer to have a Spitting Image head?
Probably, yeah.
Brilliant. I think that's a very good note to finish on. Thank you very much, John.
It's a pleasure.
Privilege talking to you.
Yeah,
as always.
I'm with you, Julian.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and I will see you soon.